Welcome to this best of edition of Issues and Ideas with Chris DeBello.
While we hope that we can provide for ourselves and our families, reality can bring with it challenging times. That's putting it mildly. Those times have been dealt with through the certainty of programs like SNAP. Now that the certainty has been placed into question, it's organizations like the one my guest leads, which has been called on to respond in even greater ways than they've already been relied on to do. Only way that can happen is through the support of people like you, if you've had things go well for yourself. And if that's you, I hope you'll understand the role that you could play in supporting the Salvation Army here in New Jersey. Joining us to explain the programs, the services that they offer for those in need of food assistance and other needs is the Divisional Commander of the Salvation Army New Jersey Division, Major Brett DeMichael. Thanks for being here today, Major.
Chris, thanks for having me. I always appreciate the opportunity.
A couple of websites, we do have them at our homepage for New Jersey at salvationarmynj.org. And if you're listening on the stream or the podcast, salvationarmyusa.org, and you can find your local Salvation Army that way. What have you been hearing from people so far? I mean, we all knew this was a possibility, then possibility became likelihood, and here we are in the here and now. So how have you been measuring the crowd and the people you serve over these last couple of weeks?
Yeah, Chris, a lot of it is narrative. A lot of it is hearing people's concern about possibility of difficulty moving forward. You know, the Christmas season, the holiday season is always a struggle for a lot of people anyway, and this kind of compounds it. I can't really get into too many of the details about it, except to say that what we see is that people are expressing need, and we know from past experience that need increases in this time of year without a dramatic shift like the one we're talking about concurrently with the holiday season. And so, we just stand ready to assist in any way possible. Our main goal is to provide people what they need to make it through difficult times, give some hope, bring some joy, and really provide for practical needs as best we can.
And talk about some of the ways you do that, because you're a lot more than a food pantry or, you're religious-based and faith-based, to say the least, and that, I think, plays an important role in giving the comfort that you give. It's great to do the material comfort, but the spiritual comfort, I think, plays a equal, if not even larger part in these times.
There's no doubt. I mean, our mission statement, for the Salvation Army says that our ministry is motivated by the love of God. The love that God shares with us is love that we want to share with the people around us. That's not limited to anything. It's not limited by any, thing that other people might consider a barrier. We serve everyone without discrimination, and we are compelled to do that by the love that we have for the world around us. And it is food, but it's not just food. You're right. I mean, we in New Jersey alone, we served 6 million meals last year, when you consider food pantry and meal programs such as lunch programs and breakfast programs and things like that. But depending on the location, there's also availability of rent assistance, and certainly whenever you walk into a Salvation Army facility, you can expect that there would be a spirit of love and spiritual concern as well. And, you can always be sure that there would be somebody on site that, if you desired, could speak with you on spiritual matters, could pray with you even, and address those things. None of those are necessary to receive the services, but they are the DNA of who we are and why we do what we do.
We've been hearing a lot that food pantries have been having to fight extra hard to keep food on the shelves, because the worst thing that can happen is someone comes in assuming that, okay, something happened bad here, but something good is going to happen over there, and if it doesn't, then that person becomes even more lost and confused and pressured than they already have. As far as your food banks and food supplies, how are you at this time of year? I mean, is this time of year actually for lack of a better phrase, a good time for this to happen, because people have donating already either in mind or forming in mind?
Yeah, in a way it is, and that's a really interesting point that you made, Chris, because we, in every community that we serve in the state of New Jersey, we've always been blessed by generous donors and generous neighbors who desire to help their own neighbors through the avenue of the Salvation Army. And so certainly there's a lot of gearing up for Thanksgiving, meal distribution and Christmas assistance and things like that. So there is that. We have wonderful partners through food banks in local communities and things like that. Plus, the idea of what the Salvation Army does. We're most visible with the holiday season. There's no doubt about it. And that benefits us in great ways because the communities that we serve entrust us to help their neighbors that are in need, and so find that we're a great conduit for them to support their own neighbors that need our support. So I hesitate to say that we have enough because it never feels like enough. The need continues to rise. But we're blessed to have generous donors and generous neighbors who want to help each other in our communities.
So Major Brett DeMichael, who is the divisional commander of the Salvation Army New Jersey Division, salvationarmynj.org. If you're listening on the podcast, stream salvationarmyusa.org. And that site will get you to the location and the services of your local Salvation Army. And you're listening to Issues and Ideas. People donating, certainly that's one part of the equation. People giving comfort and organizing another part of the equation. Volunteers, what's the role they play in times like this? And is there a need for people power to get behind everything that you've got going on right now?
Yeah, always. That's a great question, and I'm glad you asked it, Chris, because volunteerism is always a need for the Salvation Army, particularly this time of year. When you walk into, if you're someone who needs our assistance, and you walk in for, say, a food distribution or a toy distribution at Christmas time, the majority of the people that you're going to encounter are going to be the volunteers that are giving of their time to serve their neighbors in the community. Certainly, it's no secret that the majority of the people that you see ringing the bells at Christmas time, kettles for the Salvation Army, are volunteers as well. And so those volunteer opportunities are plentiful in the state of New Jersey. And again, I would direct anybody to our website, salvationarmynj.org, for opportunities to volunteer their time. For the most part, we can almost always accommodate somebody's schedule, someone's need, someone's desire, and the way that they would like to support us. There'll almost always be an opportunity for somebody to be able to do that, and it's the lifeblood of who we are, particularly this time of year.
As far as donations, what serves you and the work you do better? Is it food donations, or can you get more done with cash and gift card donations?
Yeah, if I'm being candid with you, Chris, the cash and gift card donations are obviously the easiest ones to utilize because they can go in a way that maybe we don't anticipate. We can utilize a cash donation to buy extra toys if we need them, extra food if we need it. We're not going to turn away any kind of donation. We're grateful for it. We'll receive it, and we'll do everything we can to distribute it appropriately because that's what people trust us to do. But if you're asking me, the easiest way for someone to participate in that way would be a cash or a gift card donation. Now, also have to acknowledge that that's not possible for everyone, and would never want to close the door on what people can do as opposed to what they'd like to do. I mean, everybody would probably like to give money, but not everybody can. And so, whatever is feasible for the individual, we're happy to accept and utilize. But to answer your direct question, yeah, the cash donations are what works the best, and we guarantee you, we promise you, that 100% of that cash donation stays local in your community, whatever community you designate. We really are proud of that, and we want people to be able to know that they're helping their own neighbors.
I'm not saying whether that idea is right or wrong, but I think it gives people the motivation to step forward when they know that they're helping people around them, their coworkers, their friends, their family members. I mean, hunger is one of those things we suffer with in silence when we have to deal with it. It's not something you want to go around with a badge on. I have no food for my table this month. Please help. I mean, people don't work that way. They keep it to themselves. And getting back to the faith aspect of the Salvation Army, when someone comes in for food assistance, for example, do they learn about all the other ways that their spirit, their heart, their life could be supported and that they might not have considered or connected with the Salvation Army? Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, people don't even recognize it, but the word salvation is right in our name. That's who we are, and that to us, that's a very spiritual term that has a definition that we're always happy to explain to those who may wonder what that's all about. But for sure, anytime you walk into a Salvation Army facility, there's going to be evidence all around you of what the holistic nature of our ministry is all about. It's about, again, the love of God flowing through people that desire to serve their neighbors, because that's what the Bible asks us to do. And you don't even have to be on board with that spiritual message to want to help us, because I think the idea of serving each other is sort of a universal cause that people in their heart of hearts really want to get on board with. It fills a natural desire that's in our heart to be able to serve each other and to love people. That's how we're built as people, and so the desire to do that is just really baked into everything that we do, and I think it connects with where people are. And there's evidence of that whenever the Salvation Army is present. At least that's our hope. That's our end goal for sure.
And in these times of challenge and trials for families in need, there's over 800,000 people in New Jersey who have been relying on the SNAP benefits program. I think when people who, as I said back in the introduction, people who have things going well for them hear that number, I think first it comes as a surprise to them that the number is that large.
Yeah.
And second, if they have a heart and a soul, I think they see that they look around in their lives saying, I got enough I could do for others. And this, I've been saying this with greater frequency in these past few months. If a lot of people do just a little, a lot of things can become for the better.
Yeah, for sure. And I the thing that strikes me as you mentioned that number, excuse me, is that with a number like that in our state, no matter what situation you're in, you know somebody who's in that situation. You may not know that you know somebody, but everybody knows somebody that's in that situation. And with the potential increase, it almost reminds me of things that happened during COVID, when people who had never been in the situation that they are before find themselves in that situation, and they're not really sure what to do or where to go. And hopefully the Salvation Army is recognizable enough that you may not know exactly who we are, you may not know exactly what we're about, but you know that when you find the Salvation Army, they're going to be ready and willing to help you and to serve you and to love you in very practical ways. And that's our desire. That's why it's so important that people recognize the shield. They recognize who we are and what we do, even to the smallest degree, because people just know your neighbors need that help, and anything that we can do to point each other in the right direction to receive that and even participate in that is just really what living together in community is all about.
I'm going to close this segment by saying to you, if you are one of those people in need, there's no shame in stepping forward and asking for assistance, for help, because without it, left on your own, you can be stubborn and struggle, but with organizations like the Salvation Army, they can bring peace into your heart and soul and put food on your table and give you the strength you need to fight against the challenging times that so many are facing in the present day. Find out more about the Salvation Army in New Jersey, salvationarmynj.org. If you're listening elsewhere, salvationarmyusa.org, and that'll get you to the local Salvation Army where you are. We've been talking with the divisional commander of the Salvation Army New Jersey Division, Major Brett DeMichael. Major, thank you so much for the difference you make in so many communities, so many lives, and how you compel and inspire people to be a part of your work and help others. Thanks for being here today.
Yeah, and thank you, Chris, for being an advocate and a supporter. We always are grateful for you. Thanks for the opportunity.
One of the many day one promises made by Donald Trump was lower prescription drug prices as part of lowering the overall cost of health care in America. That's certainly a goal that's worthy of bipartisan support. So, if that is indeed a sincere goal, then why the tariffs on pharmaceuticals and medical equipment that's crucial for so many patients? With us now to examine why America imports so much of these healthcare necessities and how the tariffs will impact the cost of healthcare for patients, along with the supply chain for pharma companies and hospitals here in America, is the Senior Director for Government Affairs with the National Taxpayers Union, Thomas Aiello. How are you today, Thomas?
I'm good. Thank you for having me.
Well, thanks for addressing this confusing, I was going to say fluid issue, but the fluidity comes from the policies. The impact is a lot more concrete, apparently. NTU.org is the website for the National Taxpayers Union, and we have that link at our homepage as well. Catch us up. As we talk today, what is the status of tariffs on prescription drugs and medical equipment? Because it seems like almost every week it's a different either delay or resorting of order, exemptions, non-exemptions. So catch us up. What's the current status?
Yeah, you hit it perfectly. It is very confusing, and it's purposefully confusing. And unfortunately, it's American businesses and American patients and American consumers that are caught in the crosshairs of this whole thing. One day we have a tariff of 100% on pharmaceuticals. The next day it's dropped down to 15, depending on the country. So it just adds all this confusion into the marketplace. And it's so difficult for businesses that are looking to import affordable drugs to make them accessible to the people to know what is going to happen. So in some cases, you're seeing companies import a whole bunch of goods to get ahead of some of these tariffs. In other cases, they're just eating the cost of it, not passing it along to consumers. And in many cases, they are passing it along. And of course, we're seeing this as it relates to pharmaceuticals. We're seeing it on other things like coffee and imported goods that we can't produce here in the United States. The president is right that we can and we should produce more drugs and other manufactured goods in the United States, but that takes time. We can't flip a switch and expect, all of these goods to come to market that are made in America. It just takes time. So we are really encouraging the administration to hit pause on the tariffs and find more constructive ways to produce more drugs, produce more medical equipment here in the United States.
Yeah, I'm sure we all agree we want more production in America, but the tariffs are impacting in a way that even hinders that, because the final pharmaceutical product it's almost like with the autos. It can be assembled here in America, but the parts have to come from other countries at this point in time, at least. Same thing with pharmaceuticals. China, for example, produces a lot of the materials needed for that final medication that the person in the hospital is going to receive.
It's such an interconnected supply chain that you're exactly right. There are different components made in different parts of the world. Some of them are assembled here, created here, and a finished product here. But in some cases, the Norwegian countries, the Scandinavian countries, they have such a strong innovation sector that they produce so many of these things, and then they're manufactured in other parts of the world. That's a good thing. We want more innovation. We want more cures to so many of these terrible diseases that impact so many people. But at the end of the day, if we do want to create more things in the United States, we have a 3-step plan on how to do it without tariffs. 1, we can and should become energy dominant. The president is right that we need more American energy. We should tap into natural gas, crude oil, petroleum. For factories, one of their biggest input costs comes from electricity. The more energy we produce, the more affordable it will be to produce electricity to power these factories. 2, tax certainty, right? The president, he passed this major tax bill earlier this year. It avoids the largest tax increase on American producers in American history, and it includes so many good tax provisions that'll make it easier to build in the United States. 3, permitting reform. It takes years for factories to get approved by state and federal governments. We should cut the red tape and allow builders to build so American producers can produce. It's that simple. With those 3 things, we really can produce more things here at an affordable cost. But there's some things we just can't produce here, and that's okay. We should want foreign countries who produce things at a cheaper cost to send them here so Americans can actually benefit from those more affordable prices for these goods.
Dr. Thomas Aiello, who is the Senior Director for Government Affairs with the National Taxpayers Union, NTU.org, their website, and you are listening to Issues and Ideas. Doing background for this segment, I was reading where the American Hospital Association had warned about supply issues going back to May. They saw the handwriting on the wall, so they recommended that medical facilities, hospitals, especially rural hospitals, which are existing on a bare bones financial foundation as it is, stock up as much as they could before the tariffs, which is all well and good. But then, again, turning to those rural hospitals, which are, again, highly endangered, when the supply runs out, so does their time. And what's that do for healthcare in America?
It only adds more fuel to this inflation situation that we're dealing with. There were new numbers out on Friday, which is today, that shows inflation isn't solved. Inflation is still up 3%. That's 50% higher than what the Federal Reserve wants to see. So there's still an affordability problem in the United States. And if you look even granular at the data that came out today, you'll see that medical services and medical commodities were all up month over month. That's a real problem. We think that coincides with this new investigation being opened up into 232 tariffs, new tariffs on, all these medical equipment that we've been talking about. things from your hospital gowns to your PPE, your masks and your gloves, to things like, syringes and tweezers, all things that hospitals use. That's going to add more pressure on hospitals to pay higher prices for these things if there are tariffs imposed on them. And then even for consumers, they want to put new tariffs on, stents, pacemakers, diabetes monitoring equipment, all of those things. If you put tariffs on them, you're not going to lower the cost of these prices. You're going to increase them. And Americans who are dealing with these chronic issues, they shouldn't have to worry about how they're going to have to pay for it or pay more for them. They should just worry about getting better. So at the end of the day, we really don't think that tariffs on medical equipment is the most appropriate solution at this time. We don't think that these things are actually going to help solve the problem. It's just going to make the situation worse and add more costs onto what American people already describe as a healthcare affordability crisis.
The ripple effect goes even further than that, though, Thomas, because you have the caregivers, which rely on more and more instances Medicare, Medicaid reimbursement. If costs are up, that reimbursement rate is probably going to drop down. And just the overall cost of health insurance, people are going to go without because the cost goes so high. But then in many states, New Jersey being one of them, you wind up paying a penalty if you don't have health insurance.
It's ridiculous. And you said it perfectly, the ripple effect. When the importers bring these products, these affordable products into the United States, they have to give it to the hospitals, and then the hospitals charge the insurance, and then the insurance charges the consumer. The end result is who pays. And ultimately, it's the consumer that will end up paying all of these different things. So yes, the hospital is going to be paying more for all these medical equipment and devices if there's tariffs, but they're not going to keep it. They're going to pass it along to the insurance, who's going to pass it along to the consumers. And no one wants to pay more for health insurance. I think that's a pretty universal thing. No one wants to pay more. We shouldn't have people paying more. We can produce more in the United States, but that takes time. We're not going to flip a switch and be able to produce all these things overnight. We need to give the system time to work itself out. And at that time, we'll have a system that is hopefully more efficient than what we have now.
Just to wrap up this segment, I'll leave you listening with this thought. Hopefully some good comes out of this. First and foremost, you're no longer buying the line that it's the exporting companies who pay the tariffs. I think that's become very crystal clear. If not, well, don't worry. It will be for you sooner versus later. Let's find out more about this issue. Other items related to finances, personal, national, federal, all points in between, policies and answers, as opposed to just others who just like to complain and do nothing. Well, the National Taxpayers Union has solutions. You can learn more, find out more at ntu.org. He is our Senior Director for Government Affairs, Thomas Aiello. Thomas, thanks for the insight today, for being here.
Thank you, and thank you to your listeners.
Protesting has certainly flourished in the recent times, especially recent days, has it not? In fact, coming up on October 18th, there'll be the next No Kings protests. So far, over 2,500 registered No Kings events. You can find out more about that at nokings.org. And while protesting may be a new experience for people who take part in one, certainly not a new means and method in America to bring attention to a cause or create change. Protesting really is part of the heritage of America when you think about it. My next guest with her latest book guides you through acts of protest throughout the ages of America. You'll recognize some of the causes and people, while others will be an introduction for you. Her book is A Protest History of America. While being an author, she is a professor of constitutional law and Africana Studies at John Jay College of Criminal Justice. She also wrote and hosted the Emmy Award-winning PBS series Your Democracy. Gloria Browne-Marshall. How are you today, Gloria?
I'm doing well, thank you.
Well, thank you for doing this book. I'd like to learn more about John Jay College. It's jj.cuny.edu. We have that link over at our homepage. As your book quickly introduces people to the fact of protesting being a lengthy part, if not a foundation of America's history, and you talk about so many of the variables as far as purpose and cause and direction, creation, is there a common thread of that protest share throughout history that you found in your research?
I found about 2 or 3 common threads. One is that there's a vision of the country or a vision of personal freedoms that are beyond what the status quo is offering. And so, therefore, people want to push against what's being offered and expand rights to include more than what they have been given. Another is a hope beyond what they have. Because when you think about the little person, the little guy pushing up against the status quo that includes the courts and the government and the money and everything, there's got to be a belief that's beyond just that little person's belief. It's almost like they've attuned into something that's greater than oneself. And then the final is a faith that even though it may feel like these are insurmountable odds, that they can push forward and create something new and different. And that's how we've been able, from the Declaration of Independence all the way up to today, expand our country to be more than it ever thought it could be.
Because when you think about it, you mentioned Declaration of Independence, one of the first protests of note in colonial America resulted in the Battle of Bunker Hill and led to the Revolutionary War, which led to the Declaration of Independence.
Exactly. So you have these colonists who are ragtag people coming together as farmers and merchants and others, fighting the monarch, King George and all that was established at the time. And so whether or not it's Martin Luther King and the Civil Rights Movement or it's the women's movement, we have interviews in my book, A Protest History of the United States, with Gloria Steinem, with people who were in college at a time in which they were fighting for voting rights. And so from the colonial time period of the indigenous people fighting against the Europeans taking their land and holding on, the indigenous holding on to their culture. So I expand the idea of what protest is and the different ways in which people have protested, because it's always been more than just a protest in the street. It's always included people sending in letters, petitioning, and standing up for their rights, like Rosa Parks not giving up her seat. All those different ways in which people can protest. So there's a forum for people to protest and a vision for people to want a country that's beyond what's being handed to them.
That brings up the point, too, because not every protests are planned protests. Some could be very spontaneous, and I guess the word is organic. They just grow within themselves to make the voice a loud voice.
Exactly. But what I've found in my research and writing my book, A Protest History of the United States, is that once that first trigger, the emotion of it, the anger, frustration, or whatever that people have about their employment situation, that's how labor unions were formed, because the workers said, no, I want something beyond what you're handing me. I want more safety. I need more money. I need to have better standard of living. And so they protested and formed unions. So they start off with the emotional part, but then becomes more strategic. And protest is then used to change policies and create other freedoms and have laws repealed or laws changed or laws created that are going to protect freedoms that may be on paper in the Constitution, but they become a reality of a situation. And that's what protest does. It takes what might be written on paper in the Constitution and makes it a reality for day-to-day life. And one of the major examples is that of the 8-hour workday. That took, from a law that was passed in the 1800s, it took decades for it to become a part of our day-to-day life. So when we wake up each day, we're waking up with the benefits of protest, even though we've forgotten that it took protest to make it our reality.
You mentioned what's written in the Constitution. It's also what's written in court decisions from the lower courts to the Supreme Court. And what's promised is not always, as the phrase goes, justice for all, which brings about the question I think that you answer so well in your book, A Protest History of the United States. The civil rights movement was a lot more than what we just saw in the 50s and 60s, isn't it?
It really is. And it took a lot longer than people thought, because we saw it on television. Because think about the development of television to show us the civil rights movement. Before that, remember, you know better than I do, that it was radio. And so you really couldn't capture the civil rights movement's emotions and everything, the context of it, on radio. So with the development of TV and being able to see television news more often and nationally, we began to see the civil rights movement actually take effect. But it was in the works decades before that, as was the women's movement. Women gained the right to vote in 1920. They had been working on the right to vote for 50 years before that, at least. And so when we think about what we're able to see, we begin to realize when you research, especially from my research in the protest history of the United States, just how long change takes. And people want the change right away. They want to protest on Friday and see the change on Monday, and that's not normally how it works when it comes to protest.
Talking with Gloria Browne-Marshall and her book, A Protest History of the United States. You're listening to Issues and Ideas. I mentioned the No Kings rallies that are next round is coming up on October 18th, and they have almost 2,500 locations planned. You look at how that movement began, it was a couple of hundred locations, maybe 50 people there, 25 people there, and within, I think, about 6 months, it's grown to this level. So sometimes protest requires devotion and dedication, devotion and faith side of things, certainly, but devotion to a cause as well.
It certainly does. And once it begins to pick up steam, you'll see leaders emerge from the protests. And the government or the corporation or whatever is at the heart of protest will then start cracking down. And as it gets worse in its treatment of protesters, because protesting is inherently dangerous, because the status quo, the society, the traditionalists, and other people will think, who are you to stand up against us? Don't you understand we know what's best for you? You take what we give you and be quiet about it. And if you're not going to be quiet, then we're going to crack down, we're going to use violence, and then other people join in and try to start using violence as well, and then vigilante groups. So you're going to see these standoffs between people who are protesting, and more people then join in the protest, saying that's not fair, that's not the way people should be treated. And as that begins to expand, the protest, as you pointed out, will bring in more and more people who are persuaded that they too have to take a stand on behalf of the rights that we want to enjoy.
Of all the people that you focus on in a protest history of the United States, as I referred to in the introduction, some will be recognizable to people, but who's one of the people you write about that you hope people will want to learn even more about, study more about, and learn from them, and what they accomplished, what they gave their dedication to, and the cause that they brought attention to?
I would say I'm going to mention Tom Hayden from University of Michigan. He was a protester who gave us the teach-in. And that was something that's very important. We need to learn what these issues are. Why are we protesting? What are we protesting about? And what strategies can we use? He used the idea of the educational system to say, let's take it beyond the classroom into the communities. I think people should have more teach-ins around the issues. What does it mean to have a No King's Day? Why is it thought of that this person in the White House now is acting like a king, besides the fact he called himself one? But why are we in need of protest right now? And another person I would say is Daisy Bates. Now, that was another form of protest. She was a secretary of the NAACP in Little Rock, Arkansas, and she was the one who helped young people desegregate the Central High School there in Little Rock. And she also went on to stand up against people who wanted to force her to disclose the members of the NAACP there. She almost, was put in jeopardy so many times and was threatened many times. And these are two very different people in two different eras, but they represent different forms of protest. And I think they were very well known in their time, but then time passes and we don't know them. And so a protest history of the United States talks about what the indigenous did in their forms of protest 500 years ago, the enslaved uprisings as a form of protest, as well as anti-war protests, forming unions. What I want people to get is that there are so many ways in which you can protest. Yes, you can march in the street, but the nameless people, and as you mentioned, 2,500 protests around the country they're going to be formed by people will never know their name, but will benefit from their actions. But people who have led protests have put themselves in jeopardy as well. And we should remember who they are and the sacrifices they made.
And for you listening, I want to give you a reminder, too. If you're one of those people who thinks that protesting is just talking and nothing results from it, well, let me give you a name to remind you of the importance of protesting. Lech Wałęsa, who was a shipyard worker in Poland. And the protests he led in those shipyards, put it mildly, certainly changed the direction of the country of Poland, did it not, as it shook free from communism. So if you can do it on a grand scale, you can do it on a local scale, and you can achieve what's righteous and just. I mean, you can certainly have beliefs that are toxic and poison, and once you try standing for those, you'll quickly learn that they are what they are. But for protesting what is right, what is fair, what is just, there's no reason not to do everything you can to ensure that all that comes about for everybody. To learn more and get a better understanding of protest history in our nation, that's why Gloria's book is the go-to, A Protest History of the United States. Along with being an author, she's professor of constitutional law and Africana studies at John Jay College of Criminal Justice. Also an Emmy Award-winning writer and host of the PBS series Your Democracy. Gloria Browne-Marshall, thank you for the reminder of this important element of our history as a nation and how it preserves and strengthens us as a nation. Thanks for being here today.
Thank you, and power to the people.
While the Jeffrey Epstein story has focused, for the most part, on politics, conspiracies, things like that, it's vital not to forget that there are human beings who have been made victims from being subjected to what they were. This is true about all victims of human trafficking. You see, we as observers of these stories, we hear about the rescue of someone from this evil and we'll think, well, that's the end of the story. It's certainly not for them. What do these victims need for recovery? What do and can their future hold for them? With us now to explore all this is someone who's helped victims in their trafficking aftermath as part of the team at Freedom Network USA and as Director of Legal Advocacy with Volunteer Lawyers for Justice in New Jersey. Jessica Kitson, how are you today, Jessica?
I'm great. Thanks so much, Chris. Thanks for having me.
Two websites. We have them at our homepage as well for Freedom Network USA. It's freedomnetworkusa.org. Volunteer Lawyers for Justice in New Jersey, VLJNJ.org. And again, those are over at our homepage for your reference. Certainly, hopefully, I hope you will take the time to learn about this aspect of the story, which not enough people are paying attention to. As I said in the introduction, Jessica, the outsiders like myself, we hear the rescue and the prosecution. We think that's the end. What lies ahead in the psyche, the well-being, the recovery for a victim of human trafficking after the public pretty much turns away from their story?
That's right. I think that's such an important question. And of course, I want to preface by saying there's no one-size-fits-all answer, right? No two survivors are the same. No two trafficking experiences are the same. But where there is commonality is the need for services. And so whether those services are legal services that my organization, Volunteer Lawyers for Justice, provides, or the incredible social services that are provided by social workers, by housing advocates, mental health providers, we know that victimization leads to trafficking. And for someone who's already experienced trafficking, they are at their highest risk of re-victimization and re-trafficking if they aren't receiving the necessary services to help them put their trafficking behind them and move forward and really rebuild their life with safety and outside the bounds of their traffickers. And
relying on what you said, too, not if you talk to a victim of trafficking, you've talked to one victim of trafficking, basically. It's hard, like they say with autism. You can't have a blanket statement for all. But generally speaking, how common is it for the victim to make themselves a victim?
I'm not sure I fully... So I think, right, what leads to victimization, right, is... It's going to be lots of different things, but the commonality is vulnerability. And vulnerability can be a lot of things. Some people become victims of human trafficking, and their sort of gateway vulnerability is poverty. That's a very common thread. But child abuse and child sexual trauma can also lead to that. Unstable immigration status can lead to that. Members of the LGBTQ community can be at a higher risk of victimization. But really the commonality is that underlying vulnerability. And so the vulnerability is what makes someone much more susceptible to the trafficking that happens. And trafficking, of course, itself can also look like a lot of different things. There's labor trafficking, there's sex trafficking, It happens in different industries, but really the same thing is that force, fraud, and coercion exists because that person was vulnerable to the demands and the trickery of their traffickers.
Now, on the other side of the equation, too, in the aftermath, how often, how frequent is it for a victim to blame themselves for everything that happened to them?
That's pretty common. We see a lot of survivors who are experiencing a tremendous amount of shame and guilt over what's happened. They do blame themselves for choices that they made, which is unfortunate, right? Because at the end of the day, it is the trafficker that is responsible for what they did. But part of what we are doing, and I can speak primarily from the legal community,
sure.
Part of what the lawyers who work with survivors are doing is really trying to look at what we can do from a legal perspective to help get that person back on their feet. So some of that sometimes is helping with criminal record clearing, right, which it might be counterintuitive, but it is not uncommon at all for a survivor of human trafficking to have a criminal record that is a direct result of their human trafficking. And it's because of acts that they were forced to commit at the hands of their trafficker. But then they might be out of the trafficking, but they are left with a criminal record, which makes it incredibly hard, adds to that guilt and that shame. And so, thankfully, most states in the country, including New Jersey, now have laws in which the person can actually seek to clear their record, showing that they are a survivor of human trafficking.
Looking at the numbers, and this is one of those issues where when you hear the numbers, you have to just automatically assume that these are lowball numbers because of the darkness that these actions hide in. Globally, about 25 million people are subjected to human trafficking, forced labor every year. And why does this happen? Well, it generates, again, lowball number, around $150 billion in illicit profits, not just revenue, profits annually. So, Jessica, as we all know, there's the reason crime exists is because there's money. Now, on the legal side, how is this one of those cases where, as we've seen trafficking increase in significant ways, significant amounts, is the law keeping up with the crime?
No, I don't think it is. I don't think it is. Right? And in human trafficking is a crime of opportunity. And it is exactly as you said, it is looking for ways to make money. It is a business enterprise, an immoral one, a criminal one, but a business enterprise nonetheless. And really what we need to be thinking about is recognizing that if we can stop it from that money-making portion of things, that's what we have to get to. But again, I really go back to, I think if we can limit the vulnerabilities that lead folks to be more likely to be trafficked, that is how we get at the root cause of stopping human trafficking.
Talking with Jessica Kitson, who is part of the team at Freedom Network USA and Director of Legal Advocacy with Volunteer Lawyers for Justice in New Jersey, freedomnetworkusa.org, lvjnj.org, their respective websites. You are listening to Issues and Ideas. We talk about the courts, we talk about organizations like Freedom Network USA and the work they do. One half of trafficking happens, just verbally speaking, in workplace. It's labor trafficking, sex trafficking. Does the business community have a responsibility in, who they hire, checking in, and just be aware? Almost like we talked earlier in the show about school bullying and how teachers have a responsibility to observe and say something if they see something. It's a cliche, I know, but there's some truth and foundation to it. Does the business community have a role to play in, if not stopping, at least limiting the spread of trafficking in the workplace?
I think so. I think when we think about labor trafficking and thinking of it in terms of people exploiting cheap labor, I think all businesses can be looking to see whether or not they are participating in a system that is demanding labor be provided at a rate that is just not sustainable, that is not within the bounds of what our labor laws require. And so being a little bit curious about making sure that we are not part of a supply chain that is being exploitative is absolutely a responsibility that businesses have. I would argue that everybody has that responsibility to make sure that we are not participating, inadvertently or not, in a system that is exploitative of human capital, of human labor.
We have seen policies come about now. You mentioned how immigration status plays a role in people falling into the trafficking darkness. And in the aftermath, there are needs to restabilize and rebuild a life. And we've seen programs and legislation passed on a federal basis, which is making things challenging if you are an immigrant and challenging if you are going to rely on programs like Medicaid and SNAP. How much of this is going to add to the difficulty of helping someone get their life back together in the aftermath of being a trafficking victim?
I'm afraid to say that I'm concerned it's going to have a tremendous impact, and it's going to lead to a lot more victimization in years to come if we don't recognize this and change course. Because exactly what you said, when systems that are designed to protect people go away, people are left with a lot less choices. And so they make difficult decisions. They stay in an exploitative situation or relationship. And it's because they have nowhere else to go or think that they don't have anywhere else to go, or there's a lot of fear. And so all of the policies that we're seeing from immigration to the social safety net are absolutely going to create more vulnerability and ultimately more victims.
It is challenging for you listening, but it has been and can be done. And if this is a darkness that you or someone you know or you suspect is having to reside in, there is hope and there is a path, and that's the work of freedomnetworkusa.org, where you can find out more information and for you to gain a better understanding of this issue, because this is not an exaggeration, I don't think, on my part. You might be a co-worker of someone who is being forced into labor trafficking situations. So keep that in mind as you hopefully explore the information that's at Freedom Network USA's website and learn more about volunteer lawyers and justice in New Jersey. Their website, vljnj.org. She's a member of the team at Freedom Network USA, Director of Legal Advocacy with Volunteer Lawyers for Justice in New Jersey. Jessica Kitson, thanks so much for giving all of us the path to a better understanding and respect for how much more to the story of human trafficking there is in the aftermath and the importance of supporting the victims. Thanks for being here today.
Thanks so much, Chris.
This past Thursday, Americans nationwide in a variety of ways with a variety of foods sat down for Thanksgiving dinner. Now, when it's a gathering of people at the table, there's that one person who's called on to say grace, which was the same thing with my family. And it can also be a learning experience, too, as it was for my family. Our lesson was to never let Grandma say grace after the one Thanksgiving when we all bowed our heads while she said, "Hail Mary, full of grace, 4 balls, take your base." Well, Grandma was a devout woman. I think she was probably more a devout baseball fan, but be that as it may, while people don't have a problem on the one day of Thanksgiving to give God thanks and praise for what's on the dinner table in front of them, why do so many fail to do the same throughout the entire year? Remember those achievements, those successes in your life? Guess what? You didn't do it alone. What about all those times of challenge that you survived and overcame? Guess what? You didn't do that alone either. Let's go back to your Thanksgiving dinner table. Those who claim that we and all that's around us just happened by accident, yet only use humans as the basis for that theory of evolution, are dismissed by what was on your table. The meat of animals, vegetables, all kinds from the earth, plus all that was added or poured onto them, they all just popped into being by accident? When it comes to food that's grown, it all began with God, who is our master gardener. Reading here from Genesis chapter 2, verses 8 and 9. The Lord God planted a garden eastward in Eden, and there he put the man whom he had formed. And out of the ground the Lord God made every tree grow that is pleasant to the sight and good for food. The tree of life was also in the midst of the garden, and the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. What about the animals? Let's move forward to Genesis chapter 2, verse 19. Out of the ground the Lord God formed every beast of the field and every bird of the air, and brought them to Adam to see what he would call them. Whatever Adam called each living creature, that was its name. So in effect, what we just read answers that question: which came first, the chicken or the egg? Through those verses, it's obvious it was the chicken. What else could lay any eggs? And when it came to those times of success in your life, do you call those my accomplishments? I have to correct you on that one. You made the mark, learned what was needed, understood what was expected, demonstrated reliability, communicated effectively, all thanks to gifts God blessed you with. Proof? Well, that comes to us in 1 Corinthians chapter 12, verses 7 through 11. But the manifestation of the Spirit is given to each one for the profit of all. For to one is given the word of wisdom through the Spirit, to another the word of knowledge through the same Spirit, to another faith by the same Spirit, to another gifts of healings by the same Spirit, to another the workings of miracles, to another prophecy, to another discerning of spirits, to another different kinds of tongues, to another the interpretation of tongues. But one and the same Spirit works all these things, distributing to each one individually as he wills. Now, when those times of challenge invade our lives and we survive them, occasionally banged up and bruised physically, emotionally, even spiritually, we wonder, how did I get through that one? The answer is found in Philippians chapter 4, verse 13. I can do all things through Christ, who strengthens me. We also receive this insight in Joshua chapter 1, verse 9. Have I not commanded you, be strong and of good courage? Do not be afraid, nor be dismayed, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go. All that we possess within ourselves, it just didn't happen. God blesses us with what we need to live our life according to His plan for us. This is what we're told in Romans chapter 11, verse 29. For the gifts and the calling of God are irrevocable. So remember that, whether it's the earthly or the heavenly, have faith that God will always provide, as it's promised in Ephesians chapter 2, verses 8 and 9. For by grace you have been saved through faith, and that not of yourselves. It is the gift of God, not of works, lest anyone should boast.
Thank you for listening today to this best of edition of Issues and Ideas with Chris DeBello. Chris will be back next week with more great conversations and information. Visit our website at issuesandideasradio.com.